There I am. I'm Ian Randall Strock. I'm talking about the presidents because I wrote this here book on the presidents. I actually wrote the book because I've been fascinated by the presidents my entire life. Mostly it's my mother's fault. She hung up a poster in the house when I was a kid, and it had the pictures of the presidents and their names and their dates. And well, I memorized that really quickly. And then I said, okay, why is this guy up here twice? And obviously I had to go find out somewhere else because Mom wasn't quite sure on that one. And I did a little research and discovered that Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. And so the State Department has decided when you count the presidents, he counts as 2 different people. And I decided the State Department's nice, they can do what they want. For my book, Grover Cleveland is one person because I'm talking about the people rather than their administrations. But finding out Grover Cleveland led me to learn that Grover Cleveland got married in the White House and on, and I just developed a fascination with the presidents and the vice presidents and the first ladies. And read lots and researched lots, and I got to a point where I said, okay, everybody knows about the greatest and the most and the first and the last and whatever. But what about the second and the third? And I couldn't really find that anywhere easily accessible, so I had to write that book. So that's what I did. And then I found an agent who said, well, you know, this might be something different. And he found an editor who agreed, and we turned it into a book. And so we have the Presidential Book of Lists, which is completely unrelated to that series of books of lists that you remember from the 1970s. It's just a cool title. So I was going to talk about the presidents. And, oh, by the way, we really hit the subtitle nice and long. I really like long descriptive titles, but I couldn't come up with one. Fortunately, my editor got this one. So we have this, and I am going to talk about the presidents. And if you have questions, you can pop them up. But I decided I was going to ask you questions from the book. Here is a list of presidents, and you have to fill in the blank. Okay. From 1 through 5, Theodore Roosevelt, John Kennedy, Bill Clinton, Ulysses Grant, and Barack Obama. What is, oh, way in the back.
Youngest to assume office.
The youngest presidents. Yes, thank you. Very good. Well, yeah, you're Mensons. You know, I'm used to giving this talk to non-Mensons, and so I have to fill in more of the data points. Here, I figure you're going to fill in most of the data points. You all know that Theodore Roosevelt assumed the office from the vice presidency, so the youngest to be elected was Kennedy. I put number 6 on the answer key, Grover Cleveland, because Barack Obama is the brand new one, and while we were electing him and everybody was saying, wow, look at this, this is a wonderful change, he's completely different from every president that has come before. This book has 104 lists of the presidents, and the only list that Obama is on is this one. He's the average president. He fits right in the middle of every ranking list of the presidents except youngest to take office, and there he's number 5. So his skin's a little darker than the guys that came before, but that's about it. So we have another slide over here. Ford, Reagan, first Adams, Hoover, and Truman. And in the front, yes, we have the longest-lived presidents, 93 years. That's a pretty good lifespan. And what's interesting is that there have been only 4 presidents in the entire history who have had the title of the longest-lived president. No, I take that back. What am I saying? Yeah, 3. Sorry?
Over 90?
Well, yeah, 4 of them over 90, but Adams was the second president. So, yeah, 4 have had the title longest-lived. George Washington was the longest-lived until he died. Well, he was. And Adams outlived him. Adams was 3 years younger than Washington. And then after 1826, the title didn't change until Ronald Reagan came along.
Harsh job.
Yeah, well, you know, those are some pretty decent lifespans. This is an ongoing question. Keep the answer to yourself once you figure it out. This one is a nifty fact I found as I was finishing up the book. There are 2 presidents, and I'm going to give you clues to who they are as we go along, but 2 presidents who each received electoral votes in 5 different elections. Think about that for a minute. Hoover, Ford, Carter, Adams, and Van Buren. You see a lot of names that seem to come up time and again on these lists. Some presidents are real outliers, and, well, lots of them are average. But this is a list that people don't talk about as often. Anybody got this one?
Not really.
Well, these are ranked lists. Perhaps I should have gone into that. There's actually a first and a second as opposed to these 5 guys all weren't reelected. That's my fault. Anyone else?
Lost re-election with a great majority.
No.
Attempted assassination.
No.
Well, nobody got it.
Oh, wow, I got a stumper. One for me.
All right.
These guys were retired the longest amount of time, so you might notice a little, they link up with the longest lived, Ford and Adams and Hoover's sort of on that list. Yeah, almost 32 years Herbert Hoover was a former president. Really long time. And for the first 12 of those, he was almost a pariah in Washington.
Right.
Franklin Roosevelt did his absolute best to keep Hoover's name out of everything because he blamed everything on Hoover. And I recently read a book that I didn't write. There are other presidential books out there. After you've bought and read my book, there are others you can go read. Okay, enough commercials, sorry. Matthew Algeo wrote a book called Harry Truman's Excellent Adventure. And this was something I knew absolutely nothing about until just recently. That a couple of months after Truman retired from the presidency in 1953, and at that time, remember, there was no Secret Service protection. You left the office, that's it. You were just a guy on the streets. And the Secret Service, they took him to a luncheon in Washington, and then they accompanied him and Best to the train and waved goodbye. And they went back to Independence in Missouri. That was in January of 1953. May, Truman got a hankering to get onto a road trip because he liked driving. He liked the roads. That was something that he liked from his pre-presidential days. And they got a new car. And the end of June, they hit the road. They got in their car and they drove from Independence, Missouri, back to Washington, and then on to Philadelphia, where Truman was giving a speech to the, I forget which Veterans Association. Then up to New York to visit their daughter, and then back to Independence. They were on the road about 2 weeks, from the 20th of June to the 5th of July, which is right now, what was that, 56 years ago. And I just finished reading the book 2 weeks ago. So it was really neat thinking about that, because I've also driven most of that route myself, back to my wife's family in Ohio. It was fascinating. The fact that here's the guy, he just a few months previously had been the leader of the free world, the guy with his finger on the pulse of the atom bomb. And he was just out on a road trip, and lots of people recognized him and stopped them for asked for autographs. But a lot of times they weren't recognized. And it was, you know, a fascinating concept that the president was just out for a drive by himself. And that's never going to happen again now because of, well, the media age. You can't get that if you're an ex-president. But Truman, the retired president, taking a nifty road trip, he was the guy who actually brought Hoover back into the government. After Roosevelt died, Truman called up Hoover and said, hey, you were really useful. Help us rebuild Europe after the war. And so they became great friends, even though they were of differing parties. They're all members of a really exclusive club, and they seem to become chummy after having served, if only because they're the only guys who know what it feels like. So, back to which 2 presidents? Electoral votes in 5 elections. There were only 2 people who did that, each of which had records of 4 wins and 1 loss. And I saw a hand. We'll get to it later. Let everybody else try to figure it out as we go. So here's a list, and now we've got a 5-way tie for 5th. John Tyler, William Henry Harrison, Rutherford Hayes, James Garfield, and all of these guys. Anybody figure out how these people rank? No, they're not the shortest. Jefferson was actually among the tallest. He was 6'2". Oh, yeah.
2, 3, and 4 died now.
They're the only ones
Or
who
two.
appear on his 7th slide.
Is this the 7th slide?